In that first clip, I was cycling through this echo and 16 different voices. And on the second clip, I was using the echo and cycling through 8 different drum kits. I had an idea for notes that jump rather than just stand still when they're played. So if you look up at the top keyboard is the input that I'm playing, the bottom keyboard is the output. So the further from the D I get, the larger the jump becomes. Then the D note itself repeats the previous interval jump, whatever it was. So now these jump up and down by octaves. So and these blue notes up here, the musical key of this section I have set up gets shifted depending upon where this lower section sends it. So if I were to go, so these stand still, but then they get shifted with these interval producing notes. So this is a new way of playing that I call the interval system. And I call it the interval system because it's a whole system for playing with how these functions work and where they're placed. And it's a system. I was going to call it interval magic, but there's nothing magic about it. It's very logical. I'm demonstrating a program called NoteWeaver. It's a 64-bit PC, standalone, MIDI, table-based, playground and laboratory for experimenting, composing, playing, performing, recording, and weaving in and out of notes, chords, scales, and voices in a multitude of unique, fun, powerful ways. So here I have a harmonic minor scale. And here I have a gypsy scale mapped along the keyboard, chromatically along the keyboard. And here I have a blues kind of scale. And here I have 3 tracking scales. And here I have 2 reverse scales. So here I'm going to demonstrate some chords. So here's some simple chords. And here's some more octave chords. And these are sent through multiple voices. I'm using a multi-timbral synth that has 16 possible voices. And here's more elaborate chords. And here I've simply applied different voices to different notes. And here, up at the top, I've selected different simple scales to play along the white keys after one of these black keys selects them. So and here I'll use a paint roller. In order to play with these different functions, the different scales, the different chords, and lay them out along input instruments, I've chosen to use tables that look like that. If one were to want to experiment with things, what would be a logical way to do that? It would probably be tables. So these are functions. Let's go to another map up here. These are functions that the input notes trigger. There's a bunch of input notes here, starting with MIDI note 0, going up to MIDI note 127 up here. These functions are applied to the notes, and the functions can be edited like that on a note-by-note basis. And if one were to want to edit them quickly, which obviously it would be helpful to be able to edit this stuff as quickly as possible, one can edit by all or by row or by column or black and white keys, black keys only, white keys only, or by function if you're editing a certain function. So not only is there functions, but there's also offsets associated with those functions that can be edited similarly. You can also auto increment or decrement in various ways for the offsets. And there's chords that are selected. Let's say go like this. Suppose you wanted to choose that chord. See the chord up in the upper right-hand corner. You can see the different chords. You can apply them to all the notes. You can apply them to any you want. And there's 256 chords to select from, and each chord can have up to 32 notes in it. So then each note can also be output to any of 256 output channels, and those select voices through what's called the synths maps. On the synths maps, the output channels listed here select different voices. You can have up to 16 voice synthesizers connected at a time. And so while we're at it, the synths table itself, for each voice, there's volume, there's stereo pan, there's masking, the low note sent, high note sent for masking different notes that are generated. There's the different voices that can be applied. You can also edit by 1s, 2s, 4s, 12s, all kinds of different 16s, 32s. You can edit every third one, every fourth one, fifth, eighth one. You can ramp the volumes in various ways. You can ramp the pans, the stereo pans. You can ramp these voices, and you can randomly select voices in a certain range by clicking here, which is really helpful if one is cycling through echo or arpeggiation. These tables also have auditioning controls like that. so you can audition your own favorite voices very quickly. And these synth maps, there's 256 sets of these synth maps to choose from, and one can freely weave in and out of these maps as they're playing the synth maps. And then associated with each synth map is these these tables here that direct controller information to these voices here. So for instance, this is sustain, bend, modulation, aftertouch, and those send those MIDI events to those channels, those voices as you're playing. And then this section here is used for selecting these controllers here. Each one of these has an input and 8 outputs. So you can select various input ranges and output ranges for each of 8 output controllers when you change your input controller. And then these layers right here are selected over here on the left. You can enable them and disable them for different voices. And so for instance, if one were to turn a knob, one can have 8 simultaneous input and output ranges for the controllers that are being controlled by that one knob. Getting back to here, so we went over output channels, and those select the voices, and then there's 8 layers of all this information to choose from. I wanted to open things up, and links link different layers together. So on a note-by-note basis, you can, for instance, play 6 layers at a time, or use velocity to select one of 8 layers, or randomly select one of 6 layers, or progressively, depending upon the velocity the notes pressed, kick in different of these layers right here. So, and then you can use more or less, you can play, here's the play, more or less of those layers right here. Now, this information here, along with an arpeggiator and an echo and a scale, the scales are selected here for each layer of this data, has its own independent scale and transposition. And the arpeggiators can shift by octaves in a number of ways, and then they can cycle through channels with various offsets and increment through the channels, which are incrementing through the voices by different increments. And the same thing with scales. You can shift, you can increment through different scales as the arpeggiator is arpeggiating. Same thing with echo. You got the channels, offsets, increment, scales. You can see they're shift by different octaves. Okay, then each of these has beats that you can choose for the different echo beats and arpeggiator beats right there. And you can also select beats that have 4 times the resolution. All this data here for an A keyboard, a B keyboard, two input instruments, and a MIDI guitar. Here's a MIDI guitar. The same set of tables. Each one of these has all the layers and all the scales and an arpeggiator and echo associated with it. All of that data for those 3 input instruments is stored in what's called a map. And as this map changes, all this information gets updated, and one can change it on the fly by, if we look at functions here, at function quick reference, here's a list of whole bunches of functions that can be applied to the notes. These functions here generate notes in various ways. Some of them use the interval system, some don't. These functions here update I call this I call what I just described the KG map, keyboard guitar map. And you can update that on the fly with like one of the layers of the notes that you're playing through. And the synths map can get updated, and the scale either for a layer or for the whole map gets updated, and the transposition, and you can trigger an arpeggiator, trigger an echo, trigger a one-shot riff or a repeating riff, or send more complex MIDI data out, and some other functions. So all those functions, any of those functions could be applied to any note on any layer. Chords are built and edited right here. And there's a bunch of chords. There's a bunch of built-in chords to select from. And then you can build your own chords. And to create a chord, one simply just goes like that to create a chord. And then the chord notes themselves are selected here with the chord by number. The chords are selected by number for each note. And scales look like that. Let's go up here somewhere. And there are scale templates right here to select from. And the scales can be placed in any musical key, any of the 12 musical keys, and any starting location within an octave. And then the scale notes can get reversed, shifted by octaves, shifted by cell. We can edit the scale notes here. These can be turned on or off or swapped in various ways. And then those can also be generated in any key. And then the notes can be edited. Here's a traditional 5/7 grouping of notes on a piano. So those can be edited like this. You can click between here to turn notes on and off. You can swap notes like that. Here's the 6/6 editing, a different way to edit. And you can also order notes. You can click ordered and create scales in different orders along the scale map. And there's 256 maps of these scales. So there's the play window. And this window shows that little thing up there is the input note, and here's the result. This is where most real-time play happens. And this table right here is a small version of this. This is a little bit larger, a little easier to edit because the cells are larger. And if we go to play, so the play has an echo, an arpeggiator. It's got this what's called a lambdoma grid that ratios different, in this case, different delay amounts for the arpeggiator and the echo. So you can ratio by 2 to 3, 5 to 3, 7 to 2, and these different ratios. And if one is playing an arpeggiator simultaneously with the echo, that creates some really interesting effects that synchronize things. And you can also ratio from echo to arp. And then you can edit these notes here. You can edit in this 5/7 grouping that one's used to for the scale notes, and the 6/6, and then circularly. One can also, on the fly, edit the scale notes. For instance, when echo is cycling and shifting these scale notes, it creates some really interesting effects. You can turn these on and off. You can do all kinds. You can actually click in the middle and it reverses everything. Down here, you can see the echo, the arp and echo beats. And down here, you can superimpose velocities on top of the beats that the echo in this case, or arpeggiator in this case, are cycling through. And then with this slider here, one can reverse that accentuation of the velocity. And yeah, so that's what that does. And you can zero it like that. These two things, this generates a global transposition of all the notes that are played, and this generates a global shifting scale of all the notes. What it does is it shifts the scale position. So for instance, if one is playing through an echo that has 5 notes and one shifts by one scale position, it stays within that same scale and it sounds more musically beautiful. Shifting the transposition doesn't necessarily always sound all that good, but it can be done. Either of those things can be done. You can transpose or shift the scale. Then there's the tracks. The tracks, with the tracks, time goes down like a conventional piano roll style. And these notes can be, you can edit like that. You can, if you click in this, you can shift back and forth. If you click here, you shift up and down. And if you click down here, you make the notes longer and shorter. So you can do that kind of thing. And you can shift that back and forth. You can play with that gain. You can click this to fill the notes in. There are, also you can insert time. Wait, that deleted time. Whoops. You can insert time, and you can delete time, and you can add MIDI, add notes like that. And then there's also two controllers that you can simultaneously edit over here. And there's 256 tracks of all this information at a time. Not that anyone would ever want to use that, because what gets recorded into these songs are the same notes that come from your instruments, your 3 instruments. So if we click on Help and click on Block Diagram, you can see here's the 3 input instruments, A, B, and G, guitar, keyboard A, keyboard B, and guitar. And that comes into the MIDI interface here. And those notes directly go into the tracks and get recorded in the tracks. And then they also feed through all these tables in the program. And so when a track, or by changing one number, like the map that the track is playing through, it completely changes all the voices, all the notes, all the functions, and everything for that track. So that means with very few tracks, one can get very complex stuff fast, rather than having to have like one MIDI voice assigned to each track like traditionally. Arpeggiators are added here for incoming notes, and the echoes are inserted here at the output notes. Then this goes into the score, and then here's the 256 output channels. The names are edited here in one easy place, and they can also be edited in place, like by simply moving the mouse somewhere and typing, and then you move the mouse again and it enters it, or you click the enter key. Setup is really quick. You click refresh, and for your ports, and select your input ports, click refresh, and then select your output ports. And then over here, for each of the 3 instruments, you select the input port chan, and here's input port and channel that the instrument's coming from. And here's the keyboard width, and here are various velocity curves that you can choose for the notes. And what haven't I shown you? I haven't shown you spokes. So that's spokes. You can you can do different chords like that, or you can do the chords like that, and different sizes, these smaller sizes, like that. So that's the spokes window. And then also, by the way, when clicking on setup, down here at the bottom left, you can see the input notes and the output notes generated right here, input and output. I think that's pretty much it. So once again, this is a program called NoteWeaver. It's a 64-bit PC, standalone, MIDI, table-based playground and laboratory for experimenting, composing, playing, performing, recording, and weaving in and out of notes, chords, scales, and voices in a multitude of unique, fun, powerful ways. By the way, when played through a keyboard synth, a keyboard synth where you're using a synthesizer to generate notes, and also it's playing the sounds inside the synthesizer, there's a thing called local control, and that needs to be disabled, because otherwise, when you play the notes on your keyboard or guitar, the notes will sound, and then the notes that are also sent to NoteWeaver are also squirted back and play different notes. So local control needs to be off. The program is MIDI only. It doesn't generate any sounds or effects. It doesn't do any analog. The tracks are all MIDI. It doesn't record audio of any kind or have any ability to insert effects. So I think that's it. I think I've covered everything. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. Noteweaver.com, and you can see some screenshots and read the manual if you want to. That's it. Thank you.